Și ziua bună la dialogurile lui Hartmann la Gândul. Astăzi un interviu excepțional cu Dr. Paul Coyer, unul din cei mai cunoscuți gânditori conservatori ai Statelor Unite ale Americii. Avem norocul să-l avem la noi la Gândul. Good day and welcome, Dr. Coyer.
Good morning, glad to be here.
How are you, sir?
I'm rested, fed, and feeling good.
How did you find Romania?
I have loved it so far. I've been here for about a week.
All right.
As you know, I spoke in Parliament on Tuesday, which we'll talk about a little later, I presume.
Right.
On Romania's strategic positioning and choices it needs to make over the coming years in this time of historical change. I've been traveling around a bit. I spent a couple of days in Transylvania, which I had never visited before. Loved it.
Yes, you never did it. You never did it. Yes.
I had some Ursus beer, which is great. Yeah, like that.
The national symbol.
That's right. I had some good traditional Romanian food, and I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, good. So Dr. Paul Coyer serves as a research professor at the Institute of World Politics in Washington, D.C., as well as an associate professor at l'École spéciale militaire de Saint-Cyr in France. We do have a lot of national connections with that military school. Some of our military leaders during history were the alumni of that school. He also is non-resident senior fellow at Italia Atlantica, a think tank based in Rome, Italy, that seeks to cultivate stronger transatlantic relations. Dr. Coyer's research interests include Russia, China, Latin America, and the role of the extra hemispheric powers, with particular reference to Venezuela. I will speak about that. His beautiful wife is from Venezuela. And he's very interested as well in nationalism, national identity, the role of religion and culture in global affairs. Dr. Coyer, first question, and we'll start directly. How is America today?
America is a country in intense transition, culturally, politically, and economically. We have had a major pushback against what has been deemed as very similar dynamic in the United States, I believe, than what I see in Romania right now, in the sense that there's a broad-based feeling among the American populace that the elites that govern them in Washington are not looking after their best interests. And I see the same thing here in Romania. Now, again, I'm a new observer of Romania, but a longtime lover of Romania, and it seems like there's a lot of similarities.
I had the impression that you know a lot about Romania, because in our previous discussions, you literally amazed me with spectacular insights of the political, social, economic, cultural life of Romania. So how did you get so interested in Romania? Because you're surely nationalism and national identity, it's a question also in Romania.
It is.
But surely you've been interested in a lot of other regions.
I have.
Not Romania or not Southeast Europe.
True. I mean, my PhD was on China and the Chinese-Russian-American strategic triangle.
What was your thesis?
It was the role that Congress played in the rollout of the American relationship with China from 1969 through 1980. So Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter, but I didn't focus on the presidency. I focused on the role of Congress and on domestic political and cultural changes within the United States. And the transition from Vietnam era, where the United States public was war-weary, and Nixon came in a somewhat similar position to when Trump came in, when Nixon was trying to not withdraw from the rest of the world, but to recalibrate, and to say that America can no longer bear the full burden of everyone's defense. And there were some cultural shifts that took place over the next decade, where 10 years later, after Nixon came in, we had SALT II treaty, which died a death in the US Senate under President Carter, because the Soviet tanks rolled into Afghanistan. And suddenly the American people were feeling that the world was a much darker and more threatening place. So that's basically what I wrote about, that conjunction and intersection between American public perceptions of the world, congressional attitudes, and changes in geopolitical reality.
Dr. Coyer, how did you come around Romania from China, from this big fight, this century will be defined by the relations between these two superpowers, United States and China. How did you come around this little piece of land named Romania? That's a beautiful piece of land, but still small.
Yeah. Well, as you know, and as some of our audience may know, Romania actually under Ceausescu, who I'm quite obviously not a fan of,
Obviously.
However,
However,
Ceausescu, as you know, did play a role in, maybe not as big as Pakistan's role at the time, but did play a role in trying to pass messages back and forth between Richard Nixon, a new Nixon administration in 1969 and 70, and 71, and the Chinese under Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai at the time. And so, and as you also know, Ceausescu was determined to be an independent actor within the Soviet bloc. And that led to a lot of tensions with Moscow. And Nixon was a very intelligent geopolitical operator, not perfect in my view. You know, we can discuss that some other time. He made some major blunders, but he was savvy enough to realize that Romania and Ceausescu was a card he should play, and he could tweak the Soviets by coming over here in early 1969 after he became president, as you know, and he appeared on the street with Ceausescu, and the KGB went crazy.
Yes.
You know.
May I interject here? You may know that Romania tried to play an independent role inside the Soviet Europe, inside the Eastern Europe bloc, because of the Cuban missiles crisis. The Cuban missiles crisis proved to the Romanian elite at that time Ceausescu wasn't the leader of the country. It was a previous dictator, Gheorghe Gheorghiu-Dej, but the Romanian communist elite realized that we could be nuked any time because of what Soviets were doing. So they sent, the communist elite sent a messenger to United States, to Washington. For 3 weeks he went around all the doors of the powers to be in the United States, including Congress, CIA, etc., to tell Americans, to tell the elite at that time of the United States that we don't know what they are doing, the Soviets are doing, and don't nuke us because we would like at least to live, to survive a crisis between then the two nuclear superpowers. So the United States did not believe, the elites did not believe the message, and when Ceausescu came, he absolutely aggressively sent messages and proved that that message
he proved
years
himself
before
to Washington,
that message years before was genuine.
Yes.
So when President Nixon came in, then it all went together.
The groundwork had been laid.
Yes, it ran very smoothly. Including the fact, and in opposition to the fact that Zhou Enlai, the Prime Minister of China, did not like Ceausescu. They did not like each other, and Mao detested Ceausescu. He hated Ceausescu. Well, Mao was decaying. It was in his last years of...
last decade or so.
Yes, last decade or so of his power. But no, the Chinese leadership, against all the legends built in time, the Chinese communist leadership did not like Ceausescu and his leadership. So it took years and very smart ambassadors, which we had at Beijing, to build and rebuild the trust with China. Now,
but you had asked why Romania.
Exactly.
This is
what I wanted to come back. Why Romania?
So part of it was my studies, my academic studies led me to realize when I studied that era, the 60s and 70s, U.S. policy toward China, and I studied the Cold War basically, and I realized that Romania had played a role that we had been discussing with the United States as an interlocutor and as a passer of messages between the United States and China. Intermediary.
Yes,
intermediary. And that Nixon and Ceausescu had a good relationship. And also, as you know, because we've discussed it, I actually visited Romania once for all of 24 hours as a young kid in 1989.
In your place, I was sitting last week, and when I we presented and we'll speak about your speech last Tuesday. Tuesday night, we spoke, and I was in your place. Marius took
Did
here.
you
in
talk
Marius
about
Tuka.
this a little bit?
We talked 10 minutes about it.
Okay.
And I did present your story, in fact.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
with
so-
your 24 hours visit in Romania.
30-second version from my point of view, and I'm sure you covered it with much more detail, because I remember we discussed this on WhatsApp
Yes.
from when I was in
Yes.
Miami on one
Yes.
occasion. But yes, I was here in late November of 1989. It was a month before the revolution.
Right.
I was with a student group that had traveled by train from Budapest.
I missed the year. I said 1988.
Yeah, no, it was literally a month before the revolution.
Right. Okay.
And we were. I was a young kid who was having an adventure.
This is what I wanted to tell you. You're so young.
Yeah, and
We were so young, by the way.
Exactly. And I was just, let's say, young and dumb, and I just thought, this is so cool.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I got to see a little bit of communism before it disappeared, and I thought I was having fun, and I was having fun because I was too dumb to know the danger. And it was, communist-era guards, German shepherds, as I recall, AK-47s.
Yeah.
They
All the
literally-
Soviet-style
Yeah, all that
system.
stuff.
Right,
They
all
rifled
that
through
stuff.
our luggage. They treated us brusquely, and they kept us detached from electricity for 24 hours, and it's cold in Oradea in late November.
Yes.
Now,
Late November it's cold in Romania.
I grew up in northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, not far from the Canadian border, so I was fine.
Yeah,
But,
because you are used to it
but
in
I'm
the
used to it.
winters.
That's right. But anyway, that was my one experience, and it wasn't a great one. So you would think that may have psychologically scarred me on Romania, but it did not. And then I've had longtime friends here in Romania, as you know.
Right, I know. You used a word which is important in any negotiation or any geopolitical and analytical discussion, recalibrate.
Yes.
You said that today United States is recalibrating. Is it the United States as a nation, as a cultural, as a dream, or is it President Trump recalibrating? Because here in Europe, they love to bash United States all day and night. Okay, doesn't matter. Does not matter that hundreds of thousands of soldiers dying on the in Normandia beaches.
Correct. My grandfather was not one of those that died, but he did serve in the European
served,
theater.
Okay, saving Europe as well from the fascism and communism at the same time. Okay. What means recalibrating? Is it the whole nation or only the leadership?
No, and that's a good question, partially because this is, as we discussed, this is to a degree what I did my PhD dissertation on, is that intersection between American government foreign policy and national security policy, and the necessity for having, in a democracy like the United States, having public support for that policy.
Right.
You go through history, even recent history, recent being the last 50 to 80 years of American foreign policy, you can see that certain foreign policy initiatives fail when the public doesn't support them. Détente, Kissinger, Nixon, and Ford's policy toward the Soviets failed, partly because the American people believed that there was a moral and spiritual aspect of the confrontation with Soviet communism that the policy of détente that Nixon and Kissinger were pushing was ignoring. Now, they, as you also know, because I know you know this area of history very well, tried to sideline that because they were hoping to detoxify that confrontation a bit. But the American people believed that that moral aspect of the confrontation was critical. So when Reagan came in, he was a nod to that. He said, yes, it is critical. The Soviets are an evil empire. And the American people supported Reagan's foreign and national security policy because he was in sync with them. So fast forward 40 years to today. And to answer your question, I think it's far greater than just Donald Trump. I think the reason why Donald Trump, many reasons he was elected, but one of them was that the American people have grown tired, and this isn't a new thing, but they're particularly tired now of constant wars. They are tired of America. Their perception is that the United States is overwhelmingly—
They're calling them forever wars.
Forever wars, and I think it's an apt title. And phrase. And I think the American people are really tired of sending their children to die for what? Many times they believe that there's a solid answer, but many times they don't think that there is. And given the scandals we've had in government, the corruption especially that we see that's been revealed to the American public through Elon Musk's work and that of Doge.
Doge, yes.
Yeah, it is so obvious to the American people, and most of us knew this before, but now it's even those that had drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and did not believe this level of corruption was in the American political system, cannot help but acknowledge that, yes, yeah, the American government is incredibly corrupt. They're in many, many different ways, from health care, the FDA, to agriculture, to military affairs, to any other area you want to touch on. But as it relates to our stance around the world, the American people are realizing that it's not always the American people's interests that are being represented by American foreign policy.
So let me ask you something else. You spoke about the detoxification of the American politics. It's not new. We remember ambassadors of the United States in Bucharest writing and signing communiques against the Romanian corruption. Mm-hmm. And even the last stray cat on the street knew about the corruption of the American embassy or of that specific mm-hmm. ambassador, mm-hmm. American ambassador. It was not a secret. The guy was in open. Mm-hmm. The guys, because there were
right.
successive ambassadors with a lot of influence peddling, with a lot of interventions for their own sponsors, not for the American interest, but mm-hmm. Talking in the name of the American interest.
Using high-minded verbiage.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So my question is, what should we understand as Romanians? Small country under huge, immense pressure. What should we understand from the new America that is recalibrating, as you said, that is detoxifying, as you said? Should we understand that a new shiny dawn is coming, a new sun is appearing? Should we understand that the United States is changing its policy regarding a lot of issues? What should we understand exactly?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Please translate, because here in Romania, and I will let you after that speak about that and answer this question. Here in Romania, it's like we are living on Jupiter. Our Romanian elite is like, your embassy finally is writing the right words on their website mm-hmm. and sending the right messages regarding democracy. Mm-hmm. Don't cancel elections, blah, blah, blah,
right.
blah, blah. Okay. And our leadership is like, okay, who are you? Mm-hmm. It's not the America we knew. Right. It's not the corruption we knew from right. the embassy. It's not the influence peddling we knew. So what should Romanians understand from what America wants today?
It's a good question. So you've seen how, and I know you and I have discussed this before, you've seen how all of Europe, especially the European elites, I don't want to name any names, but we know who I'm talking about, people in Brussels, Paris, Berlin, et cetera,
yes.
Reacted so toxically to Vice President J.D. Vance's speech in Munich,
yes.
his follow-up on that at CPAC about a month later.
Let us be specific, at the security conference in Munich.
Correct.
The conference.
Correct. And I believe that speech was really, really important. I believe that speech was very much akin to Reagan's 1987 speech in mm-hmm. front of the Brandenburg Gate.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Gorbachev,
tear down this wall. That's right. It was a moral stand. Okay. And I find it difficult to understand how anyone can, like the Western Europeans that have got so enraged by that speech, how they could get enraged by that speech from either a moral or a logical point of view. Because he's simply saying what any person who believes in self-government and democratic freedoms and citizenship rights should cheer for. That you do not cancel elections merely because the person that you did not want to win won, or
right.
looks like they're going to win.
Right.
You don't put people in prison or threaten to do so for memes, for Facebook posts. You don't cancel religious freedom, freedom of conscience, things like that. Basic common sense things that I think are common sense, and I think most Europeans think are common sense. So as it relates to Romania, my sense is that message resonated with normal people in Romania. He was implicitly arguing against and challenging what he sees, and what I would agree with him, is a certain level of corruption among many many European elites, governing elites, and they do not govern in the interests of their peoples, whether those be in Western Europe, Central Europe, or Eastern Europe. So how that relates to Romania, again, is that President Trump is recalibrating. Part of that is because the United States, no matter what our level of economic, political, or military power, we do not have the capability of putting out every fire everywhere all the time and bearing the full financial and other burdens of that.
Are you obliged to do that?
That's a great question.
We're entering 250th year of the existence
Starting
of the
next
United
year,
States.
yes.
Starting this
Yeah.
year, which is huge. It's absolutely huge. And
Yep.
I congratulate you as a nation that you elected a man who will make it an event.
Yeah.
Because I remember our 100 years of statehood existence, we had a president who literally disregarded that event, okay, insulted Romania by disregarding that event. You have a president who loves the United States and will make it the 250th birthday of your statehood, will make it a big
deal,
and
yes.
A big deal, and I congratulate you for that. But are you obliged, based on the American exceptionalism, to go and put off all the fires, be the world policeman, as we say in French, le gendarme du monde, the policeman of the world? Were you obliged to go to interfere in each small skirmish between cultural, tribal, little national issues and skirmishes? Because they were skirmishes. Why? I never understood why the United States thought that it's its role to do that.
Yeah. Well, we could talk for hours on that issue. So
we have only a few
few
minutes because I have so many topics.
I will make it relatively short. So that's an excellent question, which is shown by the fact that I could talk hours on this. But short answer to that question is that certain parties within the United States government historically have taken it upon themselves for not, in my view, for what are not America's national interests to interfere in and mess with every, as you put it, every tribe, every village, every country for their own purposes. And that has resulted in some people around the world, in my view, somewhat justifiably, being angry at the United States. Now, there's a saying that you're very familiar with in Europe, which is that something along the lines of, it's easy to love American citizens, but not so easy to love the American government.
Exactly.
Now, Europeans may not be surprised to hear that the American citizens feel exactly the same way. So the question is, does the American government represent America's true national interests? Now, and then you have to ask, what are those national interests? In relation to Europe and in relation to Romania in particular, as I talked about in my speech on Tuesday, the Trump administration is recalibrating. Now, you know that relationship with Europe for the past 100+ years has gone through a bunch of phases. In World War I, we did not want to go to war. In fact, it'll surprise a lot of viewers to know, you probably know this, but most of your viewers probably don't, Woodrow Wilson, when he ran for re-election in 1916, you know what his campaign motto was? America first.
American first, yeah.
So he pledged...
So Trump is not the first.
No, that's exactly right. Everyone says Trump is unique. He is in many ways. But he is, in many areas that people don't realize, trotting a path that has been trod before. So in relation to the United States, relationship with Europe, Wilson pledged to keep us out of war. For various reasons, we got into the First World War. The American people ended up, they supported it, but they ended up resenting it. And they believed that the European powers were devious powers that wanted to sustain their empires, which was
the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the American people...
Churchill sold us to Soviet Union to save his Greece
That's right.
connection.
And I'm a huge fan of Winston Churchill, but at the end of the day, he wanted to sustain the British Empire. And Franklin Roosevelt did not want him to do that. And so there's always been, a lot of tension in that relationship, even though there's a lot of cultural closeness. So coming up to today, we, of course, the United States, are facing a major challenge, as we all know, from the People's Republic of China. They are much more capable than the Soviets ever were. The Soviets were smart, very good at intelligence, and you know this. Very good in so many ways, weapons development, et cetera. But they were an empty shell economically and in other ways. The
They're not
Chinese...
an economic superpower.
No, they never were an economic superpower.
They were never.
That's right.
And they were never your real, except the nuclear side.
Which is serious.
The story, which is serious. Attention, we don't diminish that. We
Right.
don't want to diminish that subject. But aside that side of the story, Russia, Soviet Union, Russia today is not a geo-economical, geopolitical adversary of the United States. And let me, because you spoke about your speech, which made a lot of waves, I can tell you, and I'm proud to meet the man who wrote it. You spoke about the Black Sea, you spoke about
Yes.
but you said something that everybody was shocked about. That through recalibration of the foreign policy, the United States is not seeing anymore the transatlantic relation as primordial.
Correct.
As the base, the originating point, the 0 point for
Right.
everything else.
Correct.
And that shocked because the Romanian elite in the last 35 years, in its laziness and absolute intellectual impotence, thought that if they start to learn like a good Leninist, the American ideology, not the American percepts, attention, ideology and propaganda, they will be loved by Washington. And you come with your experience, building a future between the relations, of the relations between Romania and the United States. And they're saying, wait a second, guys, you did not understand. Transatlantic relations will not continue to be, are not today, and will not continue to be the 0 point, the
Correct.
starting point, the original point of our foreign policy. So you have to adjust, and you are, and I quote here, Romania has to look to New Delhi, to other countries, okay, and you even say that using the Black Sea, you say, look at Washington, look towards Washington, towards New Delhi, towards Tokyo, and you end this phrase with, look at the world.
Right.
So, is Washington looking at the world? Because in our ideological Europe, represented by European Union, we are told that you're going inwards, you're retreating from the world, which I believe it's a false statement, totally false, it's a lie. I don't see Donald Trump not willing to go and play golf in the world, and I don't see Donald Trump by his profile, educational profile, cultural profile, whatever you want to call it.
His wife is from Europe, as you
Right,
know.
his second wife is from Europe, okay, because the mother of his first round of children, first generation, is as well from Europe.
That's correct.
Okay, so the guy didn't look inward.
He's not a farm boy from Iowa.
He's not a farm boy, okay.
That's right.
And how do you make it? How do you make Romanian elite? How do you think the United States should talk to Romanian elite? Without surely insulting, without surely humiliating, as, by the way, others did, other members of the Washington elite did years prior. How do you think this should work?
Well, I addressed some of this elsewhere in the speech when I talked about taking a page off of Vice President Vance's statement at the Security Conference in Munich and adding to that from my own point of view. I believe that the Romanian governing elites, of course, just like in the United States, need to be aware that they are and conscious of the fact that they are representing the Romanian people. And they should not be there to feather their own nests, to make their own careers, to make themselves rich and powerful and famous or influential, or to be seen with Klaus Schwab and others, slapping backs and shaking hands and on CNN. That's not. I'm not trashing CNN necessarily, but my point is that your role as a public servant, emphasis is on the word servant. You are supposed to be a servant of the people, not a king.
You quote here,
we have the same problem in the United States.
Yes, you quote the Vice President Vance at Munich conference. The defense of democracy cannot be entrusted to those who are afraid of the people.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
is European elite, in your opinion, as one of the well-known conservative voices, academics in the United States, is European elite afraid of its people? Well, we are not European people. There is not such a tribe. We are a lot of tribes.
That's right.
In Europe.
Each with its own national identity, history,
cultural
and
history,
that's
etc. Thank God we have some thousands of years behind us.
That's
Otherwise, the Brussels elite would just
wipe all those distinctions away if they could. Yes,
just wipe out everything. How is this very young, 250 years old nation, very young?
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking about that symbol we have there, which is 4,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Discovered on our land.
About 17 times older than our country is.
So how is this young country going to tell Europe, recalibrate, adjust? You're not anymore the most important. How is that going to happen?
Well, I think President Trump and Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and others are attempting to do that by clearly articulating the fact that, as I started to say a couple of minutes ago, we, the United States, and I believe the West as a whole, have a major threat from China. Now, the Chinese, I've studied a bit of Chinese history, I've lived there for a while. The Chinese historically, even if you're not talking about the current iteration of their current dynasty, which the Chinese Communist Party is a dynasty.
It is a dynasty. It's built on a dynastic principle.
That's right, and they've followed a lot of the same patterns. But if you look at several thousand years of Chinese history, it follows very similar patterns you can still recognize today. And in terms of their foreign policy, they have a very Confucian view of international order. And that view of international order is China is the cultural apex of human civilization. Now, I say this as someone who greatly respects Chinese cultural achievements. They are amazing. It's nothing you should just sneeze at, as the American saying goes. You don't dismiss it with a wave of the hand. They are amazing. However, when you approach international affairs with the position that it's, and they do this de facto, you read their rhetoric, and the rhetoric is very different. The rhetoric is, the world is running amok and running into disorder because of Donald Trump. We, the Chinese, are here to provide some stability. We're here to buttress the system of free trade that Donald Trump is allegedly dismantling. Exactly. Yeah. Despite the fact that the Chinese have been worming their way into since they joined the World Trade Organization 24 years ago, formally, have destroyed it from within. But they're trying to present themselves as someone who is supporting that. So, getting back to your question, we have a serious challenge from the Chinese. The world would be a very much darker place if the Chinese Communist Party were the hegemon, if the United States were to slip and fall, for whatever reason, due to its enormous debt that's growing by the day, due to whatever missteps we could, and it could happen, I'm a historian. No empire lasts forever. Now, we're a republic, not a de jure empire, but de facto we are a commercial empire, and in many ways a geopolitical one as well. It's just a statement of fact. So
nothing wrong with that.
No, it's just exactly right. It's not a moral indictment or praise. It's just a neutral statement of fact.
Exactly.
So, but if the world had China as a hegemon in its current iteration ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, we can see what they do with their own citizens, right? They do forced organ harvesting. Now, I know the Chinese will go berserk when they hear this, but they do this. There's plenty of evidence they do this.
Ukraine does the same, but anyway.
The Chinese do this with the Falun Gong. They do this especially with the religious adherents because they know they tend not to do drugs, not to drink alcohol. Their organs are pristine, so they get Christians, Falun Gong, Uyghur Muslims, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
That's just one example out of many. You saw during COVID that they welded people in their apartments. This is
entire towns were welded.
That's exactly right.
Entire towns.
To call it a totalitarian regime is not a stretch. You imagine if that regime then ran the world. The world would be a much darker place in terms of basic human rights and citizenship protections, in terms of the quality of our lives around the world. And I'm not just talking about politically and economically. I'm talking about a cultural and a spiritual level. Humans would not flourish. They would die spiritually and culturally. That's not a good thing. Now, has the United States always been a positive influence around the world? We touched earlier on some of the corruption within the American system. So, no, not always. However, light years better than the Chinese. So my point is that in relation to your question about recalibrating, the United States, it's in our interests and frankly in the world's interests for us to be able to make sure that we harness our resources as greatly as possible to ensure that the world does not see China as the hegemon. That necessitates us being able to calculate strategically where resources that are finite, they are not infinite, no matter how wealthy we may appear, they are not infinite. We need to shepherd our resources to in the best way possible to make sure that that potentiality does not happen. That will be to Europe's benefit, not just to the United States' benefit.
So Dr. Coyer, I want to move a little bit the discussion. It's fascinating to see how the United States understands its destiny, its historic destiny. As you said, it's a commercial empire, nothing wrong, nothing, there is no judgment here. But you see, since Adolf Hitler, since Nazi Germany, until now, the United States never had a geostrategic adversary. There is none. Only an atomic, a nuclear adversary, which was the Soviet Union.
Although the Soviets did give us trouble in the third world and all over the world,
yes,
with intelligence circles and things like that, and revolutions and...
Right, but third world was also decompressing from the...
Colonialism.
Yeah. And the crimes done by the colonialism of the same Europe, by the way, from the same European powers, that the United States fought against in its independence war. You know, I always say, and
we were the first wave of anti-colonialism.
Exactly.
That's
I always say, when you accuse the United States of colonialism, as it was done all the time, and it is today in Europe, in European Union, never forget that the inception of the United States is anti-colonial. So
that's exactly right.
It's a stupidity to say that, but it doesn't matter. So now we have the United States and China clearly going into a geopolitical adversarial relation. And I'm using the word adversarial, and I'm not using as others are trying to... Okay. The equation is in this way. Romania is forbidden to have relations with Russia, with India, with whomever, without the approval from Brussels. The new empire is there, okay? Yeah. Not as territorial as behavior, not as much as territorial empire as a behavior. Brussels, European Union is acting like an empire, okay? Now, in Romania, they tried to destroy the relations with China. They almost did. Some of the projects are dead between Romania and China because either European Union or American ambassadors saying China is bad. Even now, one former American ambassador, by the way, a Trump nominee, is trying to tell us that everything is bad, that we should be the good slaves of I don't know whom. Question for you is, you'll go in this, you United States, with China, you'll go into a very adversarial relation. What should Romania understand? What should do? We want relations with China, although Zuckerman, the Trump nominee, is lying to Romania through his teeth. What should we do? We don't want to be punished by the United States, but we don't want to lose the relation with China.
Right, right, that's a good question. In the real world that we all occupy, most of us occupy.
Most of us, yes.
There have to be adult decisions that are made on the part of every country.
Right.
My own take is that it is going to be difficult for Europe as a whole to de-risk its relationship with China, although I do understand that both Romania and Europe as a whole has a lot of trade with China and is economically dependent in many ways.
And it's a huge market for Romania as a small economy. It's a huge market.
Yeah.
And it's fairly approachable. The European market for us is almost...
Oh, the Chinese are very good commercially in many ways. They make themselves very approachable, easy to do business with.
It's approachable, meaning that we could have some arguments to develop relations, commercial relations, to make some money. Because the point is, as you said, we all live in the real world. We need to make money for our budget.
That's correct. That's correct. So you need to keep doing that. I would not tell you, even though I do see the Chinese Communist Party as a major threat to global civilization, I would not say you cannot do any business.
The whole social system there is...
Yeah, of course.
It's a menace.
So I wouldn't say, it's just not realistic for anybody to say, no, you can't have anything to do with China. That's just, that's absurd. But I would say that you have to be careful that China does not seep into the woodwork, so to speak, because they are very good at using these business relationships in order to exert geopolitical influence, in order to get their intelligence services, influential through business relationships and other ways. And then pretty soon you've got a cancer growing inside your cells, basically.
Sure.
So that's something that is a delicate
At the social
dance.
level, you're saying. At the social level, at the cultural level.
And in the geopolitical as well.
Right.
So what that means, I think, frankly, that puts the burden on the United States that we need to, and I think President Trump is doing this economically, we need to make sure that we make not only our consumer market at home, but our trade relationships need to be more competitive in many ways, and to be more aggressive in taking on the Chinese around the world and winning. So, for example, I would love to see much closer relations, trade relations and business relations between the United States and Romania. If the United States, which is by far the world's biggest economy, you'll remember, I remember 15 years ago when I was doing my PhD on China, I was a nobody with no name and nobody listened to me. But I remember saying back then, China is not going to rule the world. And everybody said, oh, you're just a young kid, what do you know?
Yeah, what do you know about?
Yes. I'm sorry, it's just common sense. Demographically and in many other ways, China is not going to rule the world. It has so many challenges. For all of the United States' problems today, I would much rather be the United States than China. China has so many problems. May I venture in
something about China? Because as you know, I know something about China as well. 5,000 years of statehood. They're the before
sort of. It depends on where you date it to.
No. But I'm going to the first emperor, okay? To the 5 kingdoms unified by him. Okay. They lost their statehood so many times we cannot count. China is a huge cultural. It's a huge nation, but it's so fragile.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm going to venture in this, and I will say, you're the biggest country, you represent the biggest country, the biggest nation, but you're not fragile. United States is not fragile. To resist to Bill Clinton's lies and propaganda, to Biden's corruption, sincerely. I'm giving you only these 2 examples, but don't start with Obama.
We can go on and on, but sure. Yeah.
Don't start me with Obama, okay? But to be so resilient as a statehood and as a nation to such huge corruption and such huge lies and propaganda, I don't think China would survive.
It's interesting. So let's talk about that for a minute. That aspect of the confrontation. So one of the things that has caused the United States to survive, and we are fragile in some ways. You can see schisms culturally and politically at home right now. Clearly there are economic weaknesses. We are adding to our national debt by about $1 trillion every 90 to 100 days. There's some major issues. However, as I said before, I'd much rather have our problems than China's problems.
Exactly.
But to get to your point about the cultural and the political issue and how those intersect, the United States is a system, and I know you know this, but the United States as a system was begun by founders that, in my view, were incredibly brilliant men. Were they demigods? No, they were humans, but they were brilliant men. And they developed a system of self-government that was based upon, first of all, developing civic virtue, and developing your own character as an individual so that you would govern your own person, your own spirit first. Your family would be well ordered. It was an ordered liberty. These were not revolutionaries in the sense that the French were 15 years later. These were what I would call conservative revolutionaries, if you even want to use the revolutionary term, which I would be hesitant to do so. They believed that...
They were not so nationalistic as well.
It depends on how you believe what you believe the term nationalism means, but let's set that aside for now. The system of self-government we created creates a resilience, which I think you're referring to.
Yes.
Because no matter how much corruption and central control of information flows, which we saw under President Biden. He tried to create a Ministry of Truth under the Department of Homeland Security, infamously back in, I believe, 2022, where it would censor Americans, and he did censor Americans. Mark Zuckerberg has later come out and said that the Biden administration tried to force him, and he went along with them, unfortunately, to censor Americans on his platforms. So did Twitter under Tommy Dorsey and others before Elon Musk took over, in my view, saved free speech. So there have been those threats, but the American people knew what was going on for the most part. We were not stupid. And we have a very resilient culture in the sense, and polity, in the sense that we have multiple release mechanisms for the buildup of pressure.
Okay.
And so we have a system that can be more stable to pressures over time because we have a culture that is, we are very independent people. When you go to small town America, I sort of made fun of farm boys from Iowa. I grew up not too far north of those working on farms, so I'm very akin to my cultural background.
All right.
We have people that are very self-sufficient. Something needs fixed, they do it themselves, they don't call the government. Communities look after each other. That's what America used to be. What the system in Washington, in my view, has been trying to undermine and destroy, but has not yet done so. And that's why we've been resilient. We have this system where we look after each other. We look after our own issues, and that's why we're self-governing. And that means that we can hopefully bounce back from attempts from the center to corrupt that system.
So tell me, Dr. Coyer, it's clearly that our discussion today is around freedom. And the founding fathers of the United States, you said they were brilliant. Yes, God gave you a group of brilliant people.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
In the moment of need.
Yeah. We didn't have a generation of idiots. We had a generation of amazing men.
Exactly. We had the same in Romania. We had the same. The same process happened. Suddenly, a group of people gathered together and created this wonderful, beautiful country named Romania. And I think that it's a God-given privilege to people to create nations. I do strongly believe that a nation is a product of God, not of man.
Agreed.
The men are the instruments of the will of God. As I do strongly believe that freedom, individual freedom, freedoms with all the the family of the words coming, freedom of speech, freedom of choosing, freedom to be happy, freedom to dream, etc.
To make your own mistakes, to do whatever you want.
To make whatever mistakes, freedom to the second chance, etc., etc.
Right.
This family of words are rights, in fact, are divine rights, are God-given rights.
That's right.
Which no state, no government, no elite can suppress or should suppress.
Correct.
This is my personal belief.
Correct.
And not being a Christian, coming from a Judaic cultural, I do strongly believe in that. With this recalibration, Trumpian recalibration, which you so well explained that is an American national recalibration. How do you see the world going forward? Because just yesterday, in fact, yesterday, the spokesperson, the spokeswoman of the State Department, said that United States is moving laterally to the peace negotiations in the war between Russia and Ukraine. So it is clearly that United States there did not achieve its objectives.
At least not yet. Yeah.
At least not yet. As you said before our interview, it was a Holocaust, a game where you went up and down.
Yeah, roller coaster ride.
Yes. How do you see this recalibration going forward when European Union, I do strongly believe, sabotaged the Trump's initiative, peace initiative in Ukraine. I do strongly believe that. where we see that that a lot of things happened since the takeover, the installation of the Trump administration. Yesterday as well, if we know very well, the NATSEC advisor Mike Waltz and his team, and Mike Waltz is very honest, was a very and is a very honest American. Went out of White House after the, how do you call it, the scandal with the signal, right? Signal gate, as you call it. As Trump, how is this going to move forward? Because it's a major lateral movement with Ukraine. We all expected peace in Ukraine. You know, for Romania, for Poland, for Baltics, this
it's important.
It's so important because even if Russia is not attacking these countries now, the menace is there, the political menace is there, the economic menace is there. How are we going to move forward?
Well, when I say recalibrate, as I think I made clear in my speech, and I know you understand this, that does not mean that Europe doesn't matter. Clearly, it matters very much, and transatlantic relations are going to be still important. They are to me at a personal level. Yes. But as we discussed with the challenge from China, and there are others as well, but that's one of the biggest ones.
Yes.
The United States is, as you I think put at the very beginning of our talk, can no longer have the luxury of making transatlantic relations the centerpiece of everything, of their whole strategy. What does that mean for Europe? Well, it means, as I discussed briefly yesterday, or Tuesday rather, in my speech in Parliament. Right. President Trump, Vice President Vance, and his administration really are looking for countries in Europe with whom we share values. And by that, I mean, again, belief in freedom of speech, belief in not canceling democratic elections just because you'd think the wrong guy or girl is going to win, protecting your citizens, representing their rights, not governing in your own corrupt self-interest. If we share basic democratic values, rather than just having some of these Western elites say, I'm supporting democracy by canceling elections, but to save democracy, I'm going to kill democracy, basically.
Well, they canceled the elections, and in Germany, look what they're doing, in Romania, what they've done, in the name of democracy, so nobody understands exactly, okay, what's that?
So then we have to discuss, what does even the word democracy mean?
Exactly.
That's exactly right. So let's not get into that philosophical discussion, but I think it's fairly common sense what democracy means. I know you and I are on the same page on that.
Yes.
And this is what I'm trying to express, is that President Trump and Vice President Vance, it appears pretty clear to me that they believe that European governments and peoples that share values with them, that share a certain view of the world, and that are willing to stand up for their own sovereign national interests are the partners that we want. And we want strong partners. We do not want lapdogs. We do not want somebody.
I will read from you. You're asking in a rhetorical way in your speech, I repeat, made waves in Romania, and who would be better than the United States to be your ally, but not as a protector, not as a patron, but as a real ally, one who believes in the dignity of the nation, and the freedom of speech, and in honest elections.
That's right.
And self-governance. As this, because we have a couple of minutes left from this interview, it was fascinating. I don't even know when this interview passed already. Are these the elements of what America is offering the world, not only Europe, not only Romania? Are these the elements, the main elements of what America is today offering the world?
In terms of values, absolutely. Now, of course, we want deeper economic relationships as well. We've talked about the fact that Romania, and I addressed this in my speech as well, Romania has amazing resources in energy and critical minerals and agricultural potential
human resources, etc.
Human resources, culture,
Black Sea, etc.
Exactly. And I would love to see the United States and Romania partner together in developing those resources to our mutual economic benefit. work in the trade, in the area of trade. I'm sure that the Trump administration would like to do that with every nation. It's pretty obvious this is what President Trump and Vice President Vance are focused on with the tariffs, which I don't want to get too deeply into, but the bottom line is they are looking for free and fair trade. And you're seeing all kinds of countries from Argentina to Israel to Vietnam coming and making deals where we are actually lowering tariffs mutually and reciprocally in a dramatic fashion to help each other. I would love to see something like that happen with Romania.
But tell me, the last question, the trade relations between Romania and the United States are fairly complicated. It's a complicated game to get into the American market. I'm not saying that we are so simple in getting Americans investing in Romania. The European policies, the Eurocentric economic policies and choices of Romanian government and elite for the last 10 years are complicating even more the presence of American investors, and we wish to see more. But the trade relations with this new tariff policies of the Trump administration do not look bright in between Romania and the United States. What do you think we should do to ease this new trade, this new tariff policies of the United States?
Well, I think that the Romania and the United States should talk about doing should do exactly what the United States is doing with the countries that I just mentioned as examples, with Israel, Argentina, Vietnam, and so many others, talking about dropping mutual tariffs down to zero or very, very low.
Israel did it.
Yeah, Israel did it. Vietnam came with a week or two ago with another
another proposal like that.
Proposal, because Vietnam and the United States, the relationship has been growing strongly since the 90s, as you know, for 30 years.
Yes.
I would love to see that happen with Romania. I would love to see Romanian and American negotiators get together and talk about similar proposals where we can mutually help each other by dropping the tariffs down to pretty close to nil, or very low levels at least. As you also know, because I've told you, I'm having about 8 or 10 of my trusted allies from the United States, mostly a couple from Britain, coming on Monday and spending 3 days here specifically to discuss...
Coming today.
Yes, coming today to specifically discuss, they'll be arriving about 3 in the afternoon, and they'll be staying until Wednesday. And we will have discussions with Romanian businesses to try to build strategic partnerships, to try to find mutual investments that help each other, and that sort of thing. I would love to see more of that happen, and so I'm personally putting skin in the game, so to speak, by trying to make that happen.
And Hartmann being Hartmann, I cannot stop myself asking you, should we call you in the next future Mr. Ambassador of the United States in Bucharest?
That, of course, first of all, I'm flattered, thank you. But secondly, that would be...
Because my rumors, you know, I have a very good musical ear, so I can hear some music. But not so fast future. Well, not so far future.
I could not address that.
You could not
answer
this question.
I can neither confirm nor deny, because this is something that, of course, would be, if that was ever a possibility, that would be, of course, up to the White House and the State Department. And
Dr. Paul Coyer, thank you very much for this wonderful interview. I know your schedule is so busy. I literally snatched you to have you here on our show at Gândul. I thank you very much again, and hopefully we'll see you sooner than later.
Hopefully. As you know, I will be back with my wife shortly.
Și doamnelor și domnilor, stimați prieteni ai Gândul, se încheie această emisiune excepțională. Dr. Paul Coyer a fost invitatul nostru. Vă urăm toate cele bune și o săptămână excepțională.